Birmingham, England, January 2002. A young man vanishes. Police think he's a runaway, but a psychic has a vision of a brutal murder.
His head was pushed down and he had a blow to the head. He's describing this as if he's watching himself. He's also shown me that he's been buried underwater.
Can she convince the cops a killer is on the loose and put him behind bars? Or will the mystery surrounding this young man's disappearance remain unsolved forever?
It was really horrific. It was frightening.
Birmingham, a bustling city in the heart of England and a centre of business and finance. But like any major city, Birmingham has its problems. Over 23,000 violent crimes were committed last year. Detective Daly is a cop whose job it is to catch the culprits. But when good old police methods fail to find missing local man Mark Green, it's to this woman, Diane Lazarus, that she turns. Diane Lazarus is a psychic, and today she's in Birmingham to help Detective Daly solve the riddle of Mark's disappearance. The story starts here in January 2002. 31-year-old Mark Green is out with a friend in the city centre. When he doesn't return home, his parents begin to worry.
They called the police quite soon after the concerns became quite concrete, and they reported Mark as a missing person.
Detective Marcella Daly is placed in charge of the missing person inquiry.
Mark was a 31-year-old man that came from the Stetchard area of Birmingham. He was a lecturer at a local college in art and design. He had a great bunch of friends, two very loving parents and a very good supportive family setup.
Mark's disappearance sends shockwaves through Birmingham's gay community. No one can understand why he would go missing or where he would go. Detective Daly's first task is to interview Mark's friend.
Mark's friend wasn't treated as a suspect as such, however, he was a vital person within this missing person investigation, and he held vital information, and he was incredibly supportive towards the investigation.
He tells officers what happened on the night in question.
The night that Mark disappeared, he went out with some friends, decided that he was going to go on to another club, and his friend took the bus home. Mark was last seen alive on the 17th of January, outside, actually leaving the nightclub called Kudos in Birmingham city centre. He was seen leaving through the main doors, and then he was later seen just outside by CCTV.
There are tens of thousands of closed-circuit television or CCTV cameras in Birmingham, but unfortunately Mark is only seen by one. Police make appeals on local radio for information about Mark's disappearance.
You're listening to Birmingham City News. It's Monday, the 28th of January. West Midlands Police are launching an appeal for information relating to the disappearance of 31-year-old college lecturer Mark Green. Mark was last seen in the city centre on Thursday evening. There is concern for his safety and police...
But no new information comes forward. In desperation, Detective Daly hits the streets and begins interviewing hundreds of potential witnesses.
Hi. Can I just let you have a look at that, please? It's a missing person inquiry. This is a missing person inquiry. This is a missing person inquiry. Missing person inquiry. Have you seen this person at all?
No, I haven't.
Have you seen this person at all?
Not at all.
Can I just give you that? Okay, thank you.
There was obviously contact with a range of friends, and also friends that perhaps he had lost contact with. There was also contact with other areas that he'd been to in his life, whether it be university or friends that he'd visited. There was nobody that came to light that would have any need or intention to hurt Mark in any way.
The police are baffled by the case. It seems Mark just disappeared into thin air. For Mark's parents, waiting for news of their son is heartbreaking.
Anne and Don Green, throughout this investigation, were incredibly brave and have my utmost respect. It's very difficult to actually wake up every day knowing that your son's not there and nobody can find him and nobody can explain why he's not there.
It's now been 2 months since Mark went missing. Over 150 miles away in Wales, Psychic Diane Lazarus is holding a private seance for a woman called Myron Green. She wants to contact her daughter who died the previous year.
The reading is taped for you, just in case his message is passed on for other people. I'll not only talk about you, I'll talk about your family members as well.
Diane's seances are incredibly detailed. To help her clients remember what is said, she records everything to tape.
I've got a young lady coming through called Sian, and I feel that she passed over in an accident. She's saying that she loves you. She's now bringing in a gentleman called Mark. She's putting her arm right around him and bringing him forward. And she's saying that he's definitely passed over.
Diane thinks that the man is Mark Green. She didn't know that Mark is Myron's nephew or that the police think he's a missing person. Was he in fact dead?
I hadn't heard anything about Mark Green at all, in all honesty. You know, the first I heard of Mark was literally through doing that reading. Yes, this is definitely a gentleman called Mark.
But that's my nephew and he's only missing. He's not dead.
I remember Myra was literally shaking her head saying, no, you can't have him. So I went in to describe Mark. He's got brown hair. He's got a lovely smile. He's saying he likes art. He's also shown me steps towards a college, so I feel he worked in a college. He showed me he used to carry a rucksack. He was always in a rush.
Well, that's my nephew. He's a lecturer, but he's not dead.
He's definitely passed over in the spirit world. He's quite distressed because he's saying that
Diane's description is so accurate, Myron has no choice but to believe. She's very upset, but worse is to come.
Mark is telling me that he's not missing. He has not walked away from his parents. He's quite distressed because he's saying that he's been murdered. I don't think for 1 minute that she expected this to happen, simply because she thought she was coming for a reading, she might have a message from her daughter, but she was really taken back by the fact that I had Mark in front of me.
Diane describes what she believes happened to Mark on the night he disappeared.
He's saying that he went to a nightclub and as he walked from there, he was attacked. He's saying that he had this nasty blow, something really heavy hit him at the back of his head. He's saying that he's buried underwater. And then went on to say that it was a lady that's going to help solve the case. It was a lady that was short hair, nice eyes. He also mentioned there was going to be a television appearance, and after that, the crime will all be solved.
But is Diane right? Has Mark been killed and buried underwater? Were the police wrong in thinking he is just missing?
Myra was really taken back. I remember seeing her slumped in the chair, just couldn't believe what I just told her. And she said she was shaking with this tape in her hand, saying, I know what I'm going to do with this tape. I'm going to pass this on and get it to the police.
The next day, Myron sends the tape recording of Diane's seance to the police. It lands on Detective Daly's desk. But will it convince her that Mark is not a missing person?
Mark is telling me that he's not missing. He's been murdered.
Detective Marcella Daly is in charge of the missing person investigation.
I think on hearing the tape, my feelings were a little bit mixed at first. It's a very difficult thing to kind of listen to, but I thought it was important to remain open-minded.
He's saying he's got jeans on. He had a denim jacket on at the time that he was murdered.
She came with information with regards to the location, interesting information connected to Mark's parents, but she also came up with information with regards to me, which was quite surreal, really.
There's a police officer, a lady. She's got short hair, lovely eyes.
And she described me as a key figure in the investigation.
On the tape, Diane can be heard describing Mark's appearance, his movements that fateful night. She tells of a blow to the back of the head and a burial underwater.
There were some elements that weren't what perhaps you would call guessable. You know, there was some information, some factual information with regards to this inquiry that we purposely kept out of the media, and Diane had touched on a number of these points.
Detective Daly asks Mark's parents permission to contact Diane.
Approaching Alan Don about the information in the tape was a little bit difficult, but they felt like any information that was coming through on Mark, that it really needed to be looked at.
I had a phone call then from the West Midlands Police, Marcella Daly, and she was asking me, how do you know about Mark's murder? How do you know all these details? There's no way you could know all these details. She was very much taken back as well, and I felt I was being really questioned, big time. So I just answered as best as I could and tried to explain that I'm not a crackpot. Mark is in the spirit world, and he's given me the information.
Got very good vibes from speaking to her, and she seemed genuine and very supportive to what she wanted to help, and she agreed to come down to Birmingham to meet me.
I was really nervous when I was invited up, but pleased as well, because I felt I'm going to get closer to this. I'm going to help Mark to hopefully find his body and deal with it.
The involvement of the psychic medium was completely new to me, but she had vital information with regards to Mark's disappearance that really I couldn't afford to ignore.
Detective Daly decides to team up with psychic Diane Lazarus. She takes her to the place where Mark was last seen alive. Can she make a psychic connection with Mark and help convince Detective Daly that he has been murdered?
She felt a very strong feeling to walk in a particular direction, and that direction was actually supported by CCTV footage of Mark, and in fact it was actually the last footage that I had of Mark.
The CCTV here, just that one there. We've actually got a picture still of Mark just standing here actually chatting to somebody. We don't know who that person is and they haven't come forward.
I could literally see Mark ahead of me, and he's saying, walk this way.
Diane believes that Mark is guiding her and Detective Daly along the route he took the night he disappeared.
To him. Mark literally showed me in great detail which way to walk. Just want to go straight down here.
Okay.
We said take a left here, take a right here. Because to me, he's coming through really distressed at this point. And he keeps taking me as if he wants to sort of drag the both of us down this area all the time.
Quite clearly I had an understanding of where Mark had gone, and Diane, without having that information, walked that route, and I followed her and listened intensely to what she had to say.
I don't feel he was alone. Somebody else was with him. And this guy that I feel is certainly not a friend that's with him at this point. It's as if he was staring Mark out. Kept looking at him, staring at him. It's as if he wanted me to see into his eyes, and I felt as if I was drawn into this guy's eyes. And he said, can you see what I've seen?
Walking with Diane as she was talking about how Mark was feeling, providing this information, it was quite unusual. Certainly the trained detective in me that was very much used to dealing with factual information was still remaining very open-minded. I didn't disbelieve her. I was pleased by Marcella because she questioned a few times, but she took in all the information that I gave her, which was brilliant. And she accepted what I was saying. She didn't try and sway me anyway. She said, do you think he was here? How do you think he looked? Which way did you describe him? You know, all the right questions she should have been asking, really.
After 5 hours walking, Diane Lazarus and Detective Daly arrive at this housing estate in Birmingham's Highgate district.
This is definitely it, definitely. And I remember actually getting to some flats, and he kept saying, Diane, here, this is the place.
The psychic connection is now stronger than ever. Mark begins to reveal the full horror of what happened to him that night.
He was really hitting him and beating him up. When Mark was pushed down and kept being pushed down, he had a blow here, right there, the back of his head. The impression he keeps giving me is that his head was put down.
But police have no information to suggest Mark would ever come to this area of Birmingham. He didn't have any friends here, and it's miles from his home.
It was really horrific. It was frightening. When I was actually standing there and hearing this information, it was unbelievable. I was looking in thinking, you know, where are you, Mark? He kept saying, you're not going to find me here. You're close. You're not going to find me here. But I've been taken away. And I could see black bags being laid out. It was terrifying. For me, even, I was in a right mess and I felt awful. And I thought, these people are going to think I am nuts to say these things to them now.
But the walk has a dramatic effect on Detective Daly. Her growing suspicion that something sinister had happened to Mark is now confirmed. She decides to upgrade the missing person case to a murder case. Diane Lazarus has done her job. It's been several months since Mark Green was first reported missing from home in Birmingham, England. With the help of psychic Diane Lazarus, police are now treating his disappearance as murder.
Because there's some supportive information on the tape, as well as a very intense investigation, the decision was made quite quickly to upgrade the investigation to a murder investigation.
It's incredible, but a tape recording of a séance is being used by police to catch a killer. Using information provided by Diane Lazarus, police begin to search whole new areas of Birmingham.
Diane provided particular information with regards to locations and areas and materials that she felt were important, and that information formed part of my searching of areas.
It's an agonizing time for Mark's parents.
The waiting for Mark's parents was just completely devastating. Not only Mark's parents, but obviously key family members, and also Mark's partner at the time. And there was just no way of actually describing how completely devastated they were as every second ticked by, really.
But despite their best efforts, the police find no evidence of Mark.
It was very frustrating for me as an officer, the main officer in the investigation, not to find Mark when I felt so committed to finding Mark.
It isn't just Detective Daly who's growing frustrated.
The length of time that Mark was sort of waiting for this case to be resolved, it was actually frustrating for Mark. But in that time, I actually did his mum a reading and his dad. And Mark actually told me that there'd be a television programme, and after that television programme, the whole thing would be actually solved.
This is the second time psychic Diane Lazarus has said a TV show will lead to the crime being solved. The first time was during the séance over 5 months ago.
When Diane spoke on the tape, she mentioned the use of media, a wide range of media, but also that we'd be attending a TV show.
Incredibly, in May 2002, Detective Daly is called and asked to take part in a talk show.
There's going to be a television programme.
With Diane's words ringing in their ears, she agrees to take part.
I certainly felt with regards to Mark Green that we really could not afford just to ignore it. I felt I had to justify to the inquiry, and I felt I had to do it for the parents.
And Marcella rang me and said there is going to be a television programme, and I was really taken back. I remember watching it and thinking, it's not going to be long now.
A very unusual step, but I felt it
During the
necessary.
programme, Detective Daly is criticised for using a psychic in the investigation.
This was a real help.
It enhanced the investigation.
Yeah, I noticed you used a very kind of careful word there, enhanced.
It was quite critical of the approach that I had personally taken with the use of clairvoyance mediums. What I stress and what's important for any family that's considering this, that there are lots of people out there that will take advantage, quite clearly, but there are still people out there that have talent and do want to actually help people when they're in such a vulnerable state to find missing loved ones.
The broadcast comes as a shock to one man in particular. Scared that the police are closing in, he decides to save himself and step forward with information about Mark's disappearance.
A person called James came forward and basically provided information to say that his brother was responsible for the murder of Mark. And that he was responsible for helping his brother dispose of Mark's body.
I was pleased that this gentleman had walked into the police station and obviously said that he'd got involved in committing the crime, because it's exactly what I'd said. I said there was going to be a television programme, and from that moment on, I knew somebody was actually going to own up to it, so to speak.
Incredibly, Diane was right. A television show has brought a killer to the surface. But what did happen to Mark on the night he disappeared, and where is he now? James's brother, Robert McMahon, is a neo-Nazi with a history of violent crime. Police arrest and charge him with the murder of Mark Green. But despite intense questioning, Robert refuses to confess to the killing. But James does talk. He tells police that Robert killed Mark on the night of January 17th in his flat in the Highgate district of Birmingham, the exact location Diane led Detective Daly to months earlier.
I remember Marcella giving me a call up and saying that the place where I'd taken her was actually a spit away from where Mark had actually been murdered. So it was well worth going up to Birmingham and taking that walk.
Before this case, Diane Lazarus had no connection to Birmingham. There is no way she could have known either the area or Robert McMahon. So how did she come so close to the murder scene?
Weeks before, months before, I was standing in the spot thinking, I can't be in the right place, no way. And yet, that information was brilliant.
Sometime after the murder, Robert McMahon takes Mark's body by taxi to his brother James's house in Coventry, 50 miles away. With James' help, they bury him under a pond in the back garden, just as Diane had seen in her horrific vision months earlier.
When I found out that Mark's body had been buried under a water feature, it was just unbelievable. It just proves that Mark's detail was so phenomenal, really.
On June 7th, 2003, a forensic archaeologist is brought in to excavate the site. As each layer of soil is carefully removed and analyzed, a body is discovered. 12 hours later, human remains are exhumed. After forensic tests are complete, the body is identified as Mark Green and the cause of death is finally revealed.
When Diane described how Mark had been murdered, and when Mark's body had been found and forensic information came to light, it was quite factual that Mark had been killed to a blow to the back of the head.
When I found out that Mark had died from a blow to the head, it was confirmation for me that Mark was giving me the accurate information at all times.
How did Diane Lazarus know where Mark was killed, the cause of death, a blow to his head, and that he was buried underwater? The information she gave to police is all well documented and far too accurate to be guesswork. Diane has only one explanation. Mark told her.
I really feel I've got a duty to the spirit world because I feel I'm employed by them, so to speak. So when I'm given information, I really try and act on it straight away.
At their trial, it takes just 1 hour for a jury to find both McMahon brothers guilty.
Robert was sentenced to life for the murder of Mark Green, and his brother James was sentenced to 2 years for helping dispose of the body of Mark Green. I think Mark's parents had basically been to hell and back with Mark's disappearance and murder. I think the case, when it came to an end and when the two were found guilty and sentenced, was a relief to both Anne and Don. But again, it just re-emphasised the great sadness and the great loss in their life.
But why did Robert kill Mark? Was it because he was seen leaving a well-known gay bar? Was this a homophobic attack? Or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? If this was just a random act of violence, would police have solved this case without Diane Lazarus' information? One thing is certain, Diane's prediction that a TV show would lead to the crime being solved did encourage Mark's normally reticent parents to appear on TV with Marcella Daly. Without that show, James McMahon may never have come forward and given evidence against his brother, Robert.
I think Diane was helpful in solving this case. She certainly enhanced the inquiry and provided information that led to a number of lines of inquiries and obviously with the end result of finding the people that were responsible for Mark's murder.
To this day, Diane says that Mark still appears to her. She feels he is one of her most trusted spirit guides.
He still comes through, I still have conversations, and he's fantastic, actually.